On February 28th, this Kalamazoo, Michigan man was charged for the passing of this infant child. He was the babysitter, someone meant to protect, not harm. Just remember, this might happen to your child if you're not careful who you let babysit. This is Darkness Prevails, the best channel to share your creepy stories with the world, because this world is a strange one. The following story by author ZedBelinsky from Reddit's No Sleep forum gives us insight into the horrors that babysitters may face, or even be a part of, when they're brought into someone else's home to look after the most precious of all their belongings. So prepare yourself and your stomach, because this isn't just another babysitter's story. If you enjoy this tale, you can follow the author on Twitter at ZedBelinsky. I took the babysitting job because I was a broke college student. I'm sure many of you currently fall into this demographic, or you have in the past. My first 2 years consisted of ramen and crappy dining hall food. Instead of going out on the weekend, I'd blow off the week's stress in front of Netflix. I'd catch a glimpse of my ghostly reflection on my laptop screen. The pale contours of my face looked miserable, but I needed money. When I returned to school from break this past year, I began looking for jobs. I didn't want to tire myself out working long hours, so I was quite happy to accept a babysitting position in a nearby affluent community. The pay was good, and the hours were reasonable. I was a bit surprised when I drove into the gated community. I had to double-check the address that was listed. Yep, this was it. These people were certainly not poor. You'd think these people would have hired a nanny or something. I found my destination, a large Tudor-style home, about halfway down the row of mansions. I decided then and there that I really wanted this job. These people probably had some valuable networks they could introduce me to. The interview went surprisingly well. The parents were a bit high-strung, but they were cool for the most part. They said they needed a few nights off from their busy lives, which was understandable. Their child, Nicholas, was just shy of 2 years, but I could tell he was raised well. While his parents were chatting with me at the dinner table, Nicholas sat quietly in his mother's lap, looking at me with a curious expression. At the end of the interview, I had a chance to play with Nicholas, while his parents closely reviewed my resume and references. "You've made quite the impression on us all," the father told me as he led me out. He glanced over at Nicholas, who had his arms stretched out toward me. "What can I say? I love children," I replied. I smiled at Nicholas. "We'll play again soon, okay? When can you start?" the mother asked hopefully. I told her I was ready to start whenever. Babysitting is a pretty sweet gig, especially when the child is as well behaved as Nicholas. The plan was I'd come over after class around 5. The parents would say their goodbyes, and I'd hang out with the kid until they came home no later than 10. I'd leave their house with a good amount of cash and a smile on my face. Easy peasy. The first night went well. He didn't fuss over anything I cooked for him, which was a big plus in my book. After dinner, he quietly sat in front of the TV while I did my homework. Around 8 or so, I gave him a bath and tucked him into bed. He didn't resist at all. There wasn't even any bargaining, or any 5 more minutes please I was used to from the other kids I babysat. I rewarded Nicholas's good behavior by letting him pick a story to read off the bookshelf. I read Peter Rabbit aloud until I heard his deep, heavy breathing. At this point, I had a few hours to myself before the parents came home. I grabbed the baby monitor and went downstairs. A girl, a few years older than me, was sitting at the kitchen table. We both gasped at the same time. "Who are you?" she demanded, her hand going toward her phone. She had an accent I couldn't quite place. I think it was from one of those small European countries. Belgium, maybe. "I'm the babysitter," I replied. The girl went, "Oh," and went back to doing something on her laptop. I waited for her to say something else. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" "Eva, au pair. Sorry, don't speak very good English." I felt kind of weird about this. Why didn't the family inform me that they had an au pair? The girl was heavily preoccupied by her laptop. It was as if I didn't exist. Eva caught me staring at her and smiled pleasantly at me. "Nicholas is sleeping?" she asked. I nodded my head. "I just put him to bed." I shifted my weight uncomfortably. "Hey, if you don't mind me asking, where are you from?" "Austria," Eva said curtly, then returned her attention to the laptop. It was like talking to a brick wall or an NPC, I thought randomly, and giggled at the thought. I sauntered into the living room and plopped down on the couch. The more I thought about it, the more suspicious I got. I've read enough stories to know where this one might end up. It was like that one with the clown statue, where the babysitter puts the kids to bed, then calls the parents. She tells them everything is okay, but was wondering if she could cover up the clown statue in the bedroom, because it was giving her the creeps. The parents promptly tell her to call the police, because they didn't own a clown statue. A shiver ran down my spine. What if I called the parents, and they told me to call the police, because they didn't have an au pair? I decided to call the dad, hoping that I wasn't about to be a part of my very own horror story. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey, everything okay? How's Nicholas?" "Yeah, everything's fine. Nicholas is in bed fast asleep." I lowered my voice. "I was just wondering, do you guys have an au pair?" There was silence on the other end. I suddenly felt lightheaded. "You mean Ava? Yeah, she's been living with us for a few months now." The blood was flowing back into my face now. "Quiet little thing, isn't she? Sorry I didn't introduce you to. She'll stay out of your way for the most part." We made some small talk and then he hung up. I felt a little relieved, but I was still curious about Ava. I turned on the TV and watched it a little bit. My mind kept wandering back to Ava. Relax, she's part of the family, I thought to myself. Then, why did something feel out of place? I was dying to find out more about her. Like, was she the new kid at school or something? My moment came. I'd left the baby monitor on the kitchen table where Ava was sitting. I could hear her chair scrape across the floor as she got up. I turned the volume on the TV down a few notches. I could hear Nicholas lightly sobbing. It sounded like he was having a nightmare, and Ava was responding to it. I listened to the sounds of Ava's footsteps as they faded away and up to the second floor. I jumped to my feet and crept into the kitchen. The au pair's laptop was still open and unlocked. I realized that what I did next was a huge breach of privacy. I snooped through her computer. She had an open tab of a web page in a language I couldn't understand. I minimized that and came across a slideshow of pictures. The first was a girl who looked my age. She had dark hair and brown eyes and was looking into the camera with a neutral expression. On one side of the slide was listed her name, birthday, address, etc., followed by what looked like her resume. When I hit next, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There were more pictures of the girl, but her face was so beaten up, I had trouble identifying her. The pictures got worse and worse as her body got more and more mutilated. Toward the end, there was so much blood on her broken body that I presumed her dead. I resisted an urge to vomit. I listened carefully for Ava's returning footsteps, then hit next. There was a slide of another girl, formatted much like the first one. On the next slide, she was hanging from a post with her hands tied above her head. There were cuts and bruises all over her body. I kept scrolling through these horrifying images in shock. There was a before and after picture of yet another girl. The first one showed what appeared to be a pan over her abdomen and a coal on top of it. In the following picture, the pan had been removed, and where it had been, there was a bloody mess of flesh, muscle, and bone. A rat was burrowed into the wound, its whiskers dripping with gunk. The fourth victim was drawn and quartered. The fifth had been burned to a smoldering pile of ash. Finally, I got to the end, and I had to resist the urge to scream. There, on the computer screen, was my picture, and all of my personal information. There was an email attached to the slide. With shaking hands, I clicked the hyperlink. It was from Nicholas's dad, and it read, "This one's the last one for a while. Nicholas is going to start questioning where all his babysitters go."